All right, so last week we talked about the frequently asked questions and like what Friday is gonna look like for us in 2024 a little bit more and more, because let's face it, there's a lot of frequently asked questions that maybe don't come in the format of like a comment that you can click and reply that way. Sometimes they happen in our treatment rooms and other places like comment sections on threads on subreddit groups and groups online. So let's talk about some frequently asked questions. I'm gonna try to keep these between 3 and 10 minutes long, just so you guys can not be inundated by the sound of my voice. But I think it's important to really dive into this. This week, I was like, what am I gonna talk to you guys about? And instead of me just kind of coming up with some of the ones that I actually have listed out, and this is more for the consumer more than anything else, because students always have us on the back end to ask us questions. But it was me turning to my clients and asking them this week, if you could ask me any question as a new person, what would it be? And more than once this week, it was like the cost of electrolysis. Now, I really want to talk to you guys about this in probably a multi-part segment. And comments below will definitely help me guide which parts of this conversation become easier to understand, better to detail out. So we have a lot to work with here. So this is gonna be a starting conversation, and then we can dive back in if you guys have like follow-up questions in the comments below. So when it comes to electrolysis, and I'm gonna use my office as an example because we're kind of unique here. We have the school, we have the clinic, and there's different rates for that. Then we have, with the school, you have the student rates for like students that have been working for blank amount of hours and students that have been working for the next set of hours and whatnot. So there are levels to everything I'm saying. The other thing is at my clinic, we also do insurance-based claims. And so there is a level of like, what does that look like for somebody? So understand that this conversation could be so much deeper in regards to your personalized consult, that if you ever have, like, even if it's just a consultation where I might not be your technician and you wanna sit and like deep dive on what to ask the person in your area, by all means, like if you drop the comments below, or if we set up an actual consultation with me, I can help guide you into those spaces so that you know the critical questions to ask, okay? But first, let's talk about cash pay patients, because cash pay is probably the #1 way that people have been getting electrolysis covered for years and years. With cash pay, you're in a range. So as electrologists, we talk about treatment times. Now, treatment times usually include before and after care. They'll include like your setup of the machine, because we can't do that before you get there. We have to make sure that you're already on the table. We've assessed what we have in front of us. We have to set up everything to keep it sterile and keep it customized to you during that time. That is included in that time frame. It is not filament to follicle only, okay? It is a total treatment. But in that space, like the setup, if everything runs smoothly, if the clients lay down on the table when we ask them to and that kind of stuff, it usually takes us no more than about 4 minutes of the overall treatment. And then the rest of the treatment is usually set up for actual epilation. So filament to follicle. Now, pricing, it's usually done in 15-minute increments. I will give you my range as a certified professional electrologist of 20 years. And then I will also give you ranges that I see happening in our industry with newer electrologists, as well as electrologists in more expensive places to live, more inexpensive places to live. Sometimes you'll see differences between them being in clinic or in-house. But the ranges in my clinic are $55 for 15 minutes. And then up to an hour is $120. And so basically in that increment, you're going by 15-minute segments. And if we ever tell you, like, I think you need blank amount of time, okay, and we're not booking that, anything over the original amount is like basically a prorated minute rate based on that original number. So that's kind of like how we would stagger that. Now, if you are like someone contracted with me to take on clients as well, the scale ranges based on how long you've been doing electrolysis. So if you've had under, let's say, post-school, you've had under 300 hours, okay? Then I'm gonna put you at a discounted rate. And then the next segment, under 600 hours, it's gonna be a next segment up. Then under 900 hours, it's gonna be a next segment up. And then once you get to about like 100 and I would say, 1,200 hours. My brain is not giving me that. So up to 1,200 hours, then you're gonna be at a regular rate. That way we can get your speed up, and it gives that kind of like grace period as a client to understand that we know that a seasoned electrologist of 20 years is going to work at a different rate of speed than somebody that has been at this less than a year, okay? So as we hit those numbers of filament to follicle, the price does change. I usually do mine as like when I first have someone come on as someone who's contracted, I have them come on at, 75% off just to build their books in that first month, okay? And then after that, we go at 50% off, and then we go 25% off until they hit that number. So remember those timelines that we talked about. And in doing so, it allows the clients to have that grace in the speed aspect, okay? As well as the technician to get their skill set up and find their working flow. The other thing is the modalities, unlike how many hairs you get in an hour, changes, but also what we're doing to those follicles change. Now, like I said before, all modalities will kill a hair, but how we get there is a little different, okay? Also, how the client's comfort level is gonna be there, if there's any contraindications that are gonna be there. So you might have, say for example, a case that might require a little bit longer duration on the follicle, which means that we're epilating less hairs, but you couldn't go with the other one because it was not sufficient for what you have, okay? So understand that the ranges of how many hairs someone epilates per hour also varies in that timeline, which means that those numbers that we're hitting, they're equivalent based on how long the person's been in practice and based on modality, okay? Now, if you are a facility like mine that also has insurance-based care. Now, insurance-based care is really dependent on what you, as a member with your insurance, gets in your explanation of benefits. So we know that most cases of hirsutism that are medically marked, okay, so like basically getting a 4 or higher in any given area, equaling out about 8 on your hirsute scale, usually can categorize you into getting it covered. There are other like qualifying factors, but that really is a whole other conversation in itself. And then you have gender affirming care. In some states, yes, it's covered, some states it's not. So there are spaces there. PCOS, same deal. It's how it is coded with your medical provider, whether or not you can receive it through a medical care. That's gonna be usually your copay, if any, okay? Meeting your deductible, okay? So say for example, you have no other health concerns and you know you have a $3,000 deductible. Guess what? You're gonna have to pay up to $3,000 worth of that hair removal if you get to that spot in a year's time, okay? Is that like gonna be better for you? Okay, so there's that as well. And then lastly, so you have, like I said, copay, how big your deductible is, and then what per unit, which is 30 minutes of insurance time, is necessary to get your job done, to get that course taken care of. Usually we can only make those assessments usually once every 16 weeks because we're asking for a certain set of units, but that is another one that can happen as well. Last one, and this is kind of unique to our case, is that we have the clinic that has cash pay, we have the insurance, and then also I train people. So as someone who trains individuals, I also have student rates. So when someone has had, for example, less than 100 hours of hands-on, most of the services are gonna be between $0 to $5 per hour, okay? Depending on where they're at in that time frame and how efficient we're moving, okay? Then once we hit over 100 hours, up to 600 hours of, over 100 hours, up to 400 hours of training, because they got theory as well. Then they're gonna be at different rates. So they might be between $5 an hour to $20 an hour in that scale as well. And what you're doing is you're basically prepping yourself for an understanding that when you're not in a student scale, you will be paying something. And understanding that the students are completing efficient work because they're under our care. They're just moving at a slower rate. And so you have that side as well. So you are paying a small fee, but it is very much targeted towards what to expect when you're outside of a student space. So those are some of the details that we can talk about when it comes to pricing. If you have more questions about how I set up my pricing structure, I would be more than happy to dive into that as well. But it really comes down to what is going on in the market, to what we have to do to get our clinic to be taken care of. So the lights are on, the machines are on, and we're doing safe practices. So those are things that we think about in the background when it comes to that number is not necessarily just like epilation time. So I hope that helps. Peace, love, and hair removal. Bye.